Hey everyone, it's Carissa Wiley at sprinkledwithglitter.com. Thanks for joining me today. Today I am sharing two cards which feature a spotlight masking technique, and both of these cards feature brand new products from Altenew. These are new for the month of July, including some brand new colors of fresh dye inks. You know I love to get some new colors in my stash because it always inspires me. And I'll be using a couple of these colors today, kind of mixing them in with previously released colors. And I did want to point out that some of these colors were previously released in the crisp dye ink line, but now they're releasing them in the fresh dye ink line. And I love these inks. Now I'm going to pull in some other greens and oranges because I'm going to be using this Craft Your Life Tangerine Grove kit. This kit from Altenew includes the stamp set, the coordinating embossing folder, stencil set, as well as the coordinating die. And if you know anything about me at all, I am obsessed with anything citrus because our family has been growing citrus for years. Now I'm also going to create a second card featuring the ginormous Flutter and Bloom stamp set. I'm also going to use the coordinating dies and layering stencils. There is an embossing folder that coordinates with this set as well. I'm not using it on my project today, but know that that is available. So I'm going to start, and I have my stamp wheel here, and I'm going to stamp some of these images onto an A2 size panel of white cardstock. I did want to point out that all of their products, the layering stencils and the stamps, come with these guides for kind of coloring in your images, and those can be helpful when you have multiple stencils that you're trying to layer up. Now, I started out with this cardstock panel in the center of my stamp wheel, and I decided I was going to go ahead and just put it in the corner there, just in case it pulled up. My grip mat in my stamp wheel needs to be cleaned right now, so it's not as sticky as it would be if it were perfectly clean. And I am going to be stamping my images in this lava rock ink today. This is a beautiful, dark, warm gray ink. It's from the warm gray fresh dye ink family. It's the darkest of the four colors. And it makes for a great alternative rather than using a stark black. It brings a little warmth to the image, but it's still nice and dark and creates a great focal image. Now, because that's in the corner of my stamp wheel and my paper hasn't moved, I went ahead and re-inked that and stamped a second time using that same ink. And now I'm going to go to the Flutter and Bloom stamp set. This is a ginormous stamp set. It is 8.5 by 11 inches. I'm using the smaller of the two floral clusters, and I'm just going to stamp it kind of off towards the left side of this card panel here. I am once again going to ink in that lava rock ink. All of the dark kind of focal ink that I'm using today is this dark lava rock ink. And I'm inking that up, and then I'm going to take my flip plate and flip it over so that I can stamp my image onto my card front. And I did double stamp this image as well. If you want to kind of run your hand over your flip plate, grab a paper towel or a towel you may have in your studio or workspace and kind of use that between your hand and the flip plate. That will allow kind of some slide on that flip plate. So now it's time to mask off an area for some spotlight ink blending or some spotlight masking, I guess it really is. And I am going to use the Altenew satin tape to just tape a border around this card panel. Now, once I have that tape in place, I just lined it up with the four edges of the panel. I am going to bring in my 9x12 Ultra Sticky Mat here and the new Pink Pearl ink. I picked the lightest of the colors because I'm going to be ink blending over the top of this for that focal image. And I just want to create kind of a landing spot or a base or a background for this image. But I want to make sure that I'm only doing it in part of my background. So it's kind of create a framed effect. Now, because I'm inking over the top of this with other colors, I wanted to stay on the lighter side for this spotlight masking. So I blended that on with a large blending brush from Altenew, and now I am removing that tape, and you can see I have a perfectly masked area that just kind of brings the eye into the center of that stamped image. So now I'm going to take this panel and place it back on my 9x12 sticky mat, and I'm going to position my first stencil, and I'm going to use some olive ink for the stenciling on this greenery. Now I'm using a variety of inks here because I needed some oranges and some greens that weren't really in the July release. I brought in some other colors. These are kind of some wonderful warm greens that I'm using, but I'm also going to switch to a cool green in that evergreen as well. So I started out with olive and I am blending that on using the small ink blending brushes from Altenew. And then I'm going to move over to swamp green. Now, if you want to take a lot of time and do some fancy blending on this, you definitely can. But I tried to pick colors that I thought would layer over this pink pearl ink nicely. So I didn't want my greens to be too pale because I didn't want them to come across as kind of pink when it all comes said and done. So I'm moving on to my next stencil here, and there's multiple images on this stencil, so I'm just kind of masking off the portion that I don't want to blend. And I'm moving over to a cooler green. This is evergreen. And if you've ever been around citrus trees, they really do have a really deep, rich green color to their leaves. Now, I'm not keeping everything true to form because the blossoms are generally white, but since I already have that pink background, I went ahead and made my blossoms pink, and I used Peachy Keen and the Tangerine color to blend my little tangerines here. Now that my panel is blended, I'm going to go ahead and line this up with the coordinating embossing folder, kind of hold that in place and run this through my die cutting machine. And this is going to give that image some dimension and texture. You can see it better on the back there than with all the colors on the front, but I love the added texture that this gives to the card panel. Now for card number 2, I'm going to use the Altenew masking paper here. So I'm just trimming down a piece and I'm going to die cut a circle from this masking paper. Now I actually die cut it on the wrong side of the masking paper. So I have to put this mask on kind of backwards here, but you'll see. I'm going to ink blend or do the spotlight ink blending in the lower right-hand corner of this flower cluster. So I'm just placing that circle where it overlaps some of my image and then goes on to the background as well. And then again, I'm going to bring in my 9x12 Ultra Sticky Mat here, and I'm going to bring in the Polar Bear ink here. Now, again, I wanted to use a light color so that I could do some ink blending over the top of this on the image and not have it interfere as much. Now, you are going to have darker areas on your ink blending where you've done your spotlight blending here. So keep that in mind. If you don't like that look, I think it's very cool to just kind of blend those shapes on the background and leave the image in black and white. That's another way to do that. Now I'm bringing in more of these brand new blue inks, beautiful, kind of almost very cool blues. I brought in Winter Lake, and I'm going to continue working through that color palette, bringing in some greens to finish off all of my ink blending for this panel as well. Now to remove this from my Ultra Sticky Mat, sometimes I'll flip that mat over and roll the mat away from the panel so that I don't get any kind of warping. And I thought this card needed something else. So I am taking one of the butterfly images from the stamp set. I'm kind of prepping some vellum here with a powder tool, and I'm stamping this using some embossing ink onto that vellum. Then I'm going to add some white embossing powder over the top of that and heat set it. Now, once my butterfly is heat set and beautiful and embossed and shiny and dimensional, I'm going to go ahead and take the coordinating die and die cut that out. And then I can kind of add that into this image grouping here on the bottom. I'm using a little foam adhesive to do that. I'm going to allow it to overlap not only the spotlight masked area, but the image as well, and just kind of pop that up. Now, this Flutter and Bloom set has a ton of great sentiments in it as well. So I'm going to grab a couple of those and I'm going to stamp them onto my card fronts. Now for the Tangerine Grove card, I decided to do something a little different with my sentiment. I am going to run it vertically up my card. Again, I'm using the Lava Rock inks so that it matches the image that I've already stamped. And this says Truly Grateful, so I'm just stamping it right alongside that masked area there using my stamp wheel. And for the Flutter and Bloom, I am going to use the thank you sentiment, again, stamping that in the Lava Rock right onto that panel. And I have some beautiful sentiments. I love the simplicity of these sentiments on these cards because there's a lot going on. I finished these cards off by trimming the panel down by about 1/4 of an inch, and I mounted them onto some card bases that coordinate with the colors that I used using some foam adhesive, and I just added a little bit of shine with some clear sequins. So that finishes off 2 cards today featuring the spotlight masking technique. You can use this with any shape that you may want. So if you have some dies in an oval shape or even a star or a heart, it's fun to kind of play with this masking technique and stamp and color an image right over the top of it. I love how it kind of brings the eye into the image. Now, as always, I will have links to the featured products used in these projects in the description at YouTube. So if you're looking for something in particular, be sure you check there. Or you can head on over to my blog at sprinkledwithglitter.com. I'll have that linked below as well. Over there, you'll find more still shots, more information, and a complete list of supplies. As always, I want to thank you so much for stopping by and hanging out with me today. I am so glad you're here. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you enjoyed these projects. If you did, please give this video a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notifications here so you don't miss any of my card making and paper crafting video tutorials. Thanks again for watching, and until next time, I hope you have a fabulous day.